and when you feel as if you'd like to play something a little bit scary.
Imagine this. A little boy walking to school in a faded pink dress, barefoot in the snow, while the other kids point and laugh so hard they almost fall over. That boy grew up to become the toughest man Hollywood ever put on screen. But his daughter just came forward and said, "Everything you thought you knew about my dad is wrong. He wasn't born mean. He wasn't born angry. He was born hungry, scared, and wearing his sister's clothes because that was all his family had. And the pain from those early days never left him. Not even when he was worth millions. Not even when the whole world was afraid of him." This is the real story of Charles Bronson, told the way his daughter finally wants you to hear it. He came into this world on November 3rd, 1921, in a tiny wooden shack in Ehrenfeld, Pennsylvania, a dirty coal mining town most people have never heard of. His real name was Charles Dennis Bukinski, and he was the 11th of 15 children. 15 kids, 2 parents, one tiny house with no running water, no electricity, and no bathroom inside. They used an outhouse in the backyard that they shared with neighbors. The trains full of coal rolled right past their windows day and night, shaking the walls and covering everything in black dust. There were so many kids that they had to sleep in shifts. Some on the floor, some on chairs, some just curled up in corners. When little Charles finally got a pair of shoes, he wore them to school in the morning, and then had to give them to his brother for the night shift in the mine. Same thing with socks. He would come home, peel off the only pair he had, and hand them over so someone else could stay a little warmer underground. His father was a coal miner who came home drunk and angry most nights. The second his mother whispered, "He's coming." All 15 kids scattered like mice and hid. Charles never once said he loved his dad. He said he was terrified of him. When he was only 10 years old, his father died from the same black lung that killed so many miners. The family had nothing. No money, no food, no hope. So at 10 years old, Charles went to work in the coal mine himself. He made $1 for every ton of coal he dug. It took him a whole week to earn that $1. That's about $24 in today's money for a child crawling through dark tunnels with a lamp on his head, breathing poison dust that would one day kill him too. He hated school because he only spoke Lithuanian and Russian at home. The kids made fun of his accent, called him names, and laughed at the dresses he wore when there were no boy clothes left. He left school after 9th grade and never went back. By 16, he was working double shifts in the mine, coming home black from head to toe, handing over hissocks, and falling asleep on the floor so someone else could have the bed. As all men die in cave-ins, he saw explosions. He saw friends carried out in pieces. And every single day he thought, "This can't be my life forever." When World War II started, Charles was drafted into the Army Air Corps. He became a tail gunner on a B-29 bomber and flew 25 missions over Japan. That means 25 times he sat in freezing cold metal with enemy planes shooting at him. Shrapnel tore through his arms on one mission. He earned a Purple Heart. He watched friends burn alive in the sky. But later in life, he said something that breaks your heart. He said, "I never had it so good as when I was in the Army." Because for the first time in his life, he got 3 meals a day, clean clothes, and a bed that was all his own. The war was easier than the coal mines. When he came home in 1946, he had no idea what to do. He worked as a bellhop, a bricklayer, a carnival barker, anything to eat. Then one day he met some actors in Atlantic City and thought, maybe I can do that. He used his GI Bill money to study acting in Philadelphia. People laughed at his thick accent and his rough face, but he didn't care. In 1951, Hay got his first tiny movie role for $50 a day. He and his first wife, Harriet, lived in a one-room apartment with barely enough money for food. She worked in a store while he painted theater sets and took any job he could get. Hollywood didn't know what to make of him. One director told him straight to his face, "You're too ugly to be a leading man." Another said he looked like a rock that had been left out in the rain too long. In Europe, they called him Il Brutto, the ugly one. In France, they called him Le Monstre Sacré, the sacred monster. But Charles just smiled and kept working. He changed his last name to Bronson in 1954 because Bukinski sounded too Russian during the scary McCarthy years. And slowly, very slowly, the world started to notice that ugly could be beautiful if it was real. He played bad guys, prisoners, killers, Indians, soldiers, anything they asked. In House of Wax, he was the silent monster Igor. In The Magnificent Seven, he was the quiet Irish-Mexican gunslinger who fed stray dogs and died protecting children. In The Great Escape, He dug the real tunnels himself because he knew exactly what it felt like to be underground in the dark. In The Dirty Dozen, he was the Polish soldier who spoke perfect Polish, because it was the language he grew up with. And every time he played a tough guy, he was pulling from the pain he carried inside from the means, from the war, from wearing dresses to school while kids laughed. Then in 1968, everything changed. A director named Sergio Leone offered him the lead role in a Western called Once Upon a Time in the West. He would play a mysterious man with a harmonica who wanted revenge. They offered him $100,000. Charles said no. He wanted $500,000. They paid it. He became the highest-paid actor on the movie, more than Henry Fonda. He rewrote almost all his lines himself, cutting out words until he barely spoke at all. That silence, that stare, that slow walk, that became the Charles Bronson the world knows. The movie bombed in America but made millions in Europe. And suddenly, Charles Bronson was the biggest action star on the planet. He made movie after movie in Europe where they loved him more than in his own country. Red Sun with a Japanese samurai, Violent City with real mafia threats on set, Shadow's Land where animal rights people got mad because they used real blood. And then in 1974 came the movie that changed everything, Death Wish. He played Paul Kersey, a normal man whose wife is murdered and daughter is attacked. He starts hunting criminals himself. The violence was so real that critics hated it. Some newspapers said it was dangerous, but regular people lined up around the block. The movie made $22 million on a $3 million budget, and Charles Bronson finally became huge in America too. He made 4 more Death Wish movies, each one more violent than the last, and together they made over $100 million. But here's what almost nobody knew. The toughest man in Hollywood was soft as butter at home. His daughter Zuleika said he kept a secret drawer full of little toys, crayons, marbles, tiny books, just so he could give them to her when she was sad. Every single morning he would quietly open her bedroom door just to watch her sleep and make sure she was safe. When his wife Jill Ireland got breast cancer in 1984, he stopped everything to take care of her. When she died in 1990, he sat in her room and wrote her love letters for years. Letters no one ever saw until when he died, the newspapers said his estate was worth $8 million. His family waited years and then quietly corrected the record. It was actually $45 million. There were houses in Vermont, Malibu, Bel Air, and millions more in paintings and royalties that keep coming in even today. Lawsuits are still going on because studios owe his children money from movies made 50 years ago. And the biggest regret of his life? In 1971, he was offered the role of Dirty Harry. He turned it down because he didn't want his kids growing up thinking violence was okay. Clint Eastwood took the part and became a legend. Charles's daughter Zuleika said her dad never forgave himself for saying no. He would sit alone in his study and stare at the wall for hours thinking about what might have been. His children want you to know the truth now. The man you saw on screen killing bad guys wasn't acting tough. He was remembering what it felt like to be powerless. Every time he shot a criminal eye in a movie, he was shooting the kids who laughed at him in a dress. Every time he punched someone, he was punching the mind that stole his childhood. Every time he stood silent and stared. He was the little boy who learned that words didn't protect you, only strength did. But at home, he painted beautiful pictures off flowers. He fed stray cats. He carried his grandchildren on his shoulders and let them pull his mustache. He cried at sad movies. He wrote love poems to a woman who had been gone for 20 years. He was never the monster. He was the scared little boy in the dress who grew up and decided the world would never hurt him again. That's the real Charles Bronson. Not the killer. Not the vigilante. Just a man who survived hell and spent his whole life making sure no one ever laughed at him again. His daughter Zuleika said it best. My dad wasn't tough because he wanted to be. He was tough because he had to be. Inside, he was the gentlest person I ever knew. If this story moved you the way it moves me every time I tell it, please hit that like button right now. Share this video with someone who grew up watching Death Wish and thinking Bronson was just a killer, because they deserve to know the truth. Subscribe and ring the bell, because I'm bringing you more stories about the real people behind the legends we thought we knew. Charles Bronson is gone, but his heart is still beating through his children's words. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.